Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Nissim 95.9 and live on Facebook as well. Tonight on Fact Sheet we are talking about a matter that not only Ghana is discussing but the world at large is discussing. And it has to do with the concerns about food crisis around the world, especially with the Ukrainian-Russian war, which is still continuing, and the concerns that are being raised. As to fertilizers that nations across the world would be expected to get from Ukraine and Russia to apply it for their food crops in order to grow and to supply to the rest of the world is a matter of concern. Locally in Ghana, poultry farmers are complaining about the lack of maize and other products that they use to feed their poultry to supply to Ghanaians as well. They have been concerned about rising food prices. They have been concerned about rising products prices. And so everyone is concerned. Again, petroleum prices are also going up. The concerns about the CD to dollar ratio in terms of exchange has also been a matter of concern. And so everybody is talking about food prices and commodity prices in the country. But really, should we be concerned? Is there a concern when it comes to food being in stock for Ghanaians in this country? Tonight, that's our focus live on ETV's Fact Sheet, even as we interrogate this matter of that looming concern of a crisis in terms of food shortage. My name is Samuel Ishen, and I welcome you to the show tonight. We'll take a short breather. When we come back, I'll introduce you to my guests. Welcome back to Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Nissim 95.9 and 100.1. My introduction painted the picture of the likely issues that may push us to the main conversation, which has to do with the push and pull factors driving the general concerns about high cost of living in the country. Today, you ask anybody on the streets, they tell you times are hard, and if I'm supposed to speak in the local language, we would say, but what are the factors driving this whole rhetoric and this whole statement everybody says when it comes to the general living standards of Ghanaians? They say food prices are going up. They say commodity prices are going up. They say services that are rendered to Ghanaians, the prices are also going up. Virtually everything is going up. But what is driving this upward standard when it comes to living standards in the country? Tonight, that's what we'll try to understand when we try to gauge the mood of the country. And so in welcoming you, I say let your thoughts be heard this evening as we discuss this matter of the general living standards of Ghanaians and what is pushing people to say the standard is getting higher and higher by the day. My name is Samuel Ishen, and to help me do justice to the issue, I'm joined in the studio by Mr. Julius Jima, who is a financial accountant and tax analyst. So is Mr. Emmanuel Dakwa also joined me, who is a chartered economist and partner at CCAT Global, and will be joined on the phone lines by Dr. Joseph Obeng, who is the president of GUTA, to throw more light as to the factors which may be pushing or pulling Ghanaians to arrive at the conclusion the times are tough. But indeed, are times tough? I'll start with Mr. Amwa Dakwa. Sir, good evening. It's good to have you on the show.
Good evening, Shane. How are you?
Jima, it's good to have you on the show.
Good to see you too.
I hope you're doing well.
Yes, I'm very fine.
That's nice. So I'll ask you, Ma.
Yeah.
Are times tough?
That's a difficult question to answer, but from all indications, this can be a subjective question anyway, but I'm going to speak broadly as an economist and also an analyst on these very issues. Times are tough because prices of goods and services have gone up. At the same time, income levels and salaries have not increased, and so people have reduced the disposable income. And what it means is that people are not having as much as they will spend, and that is basically causing what people say times are, tough. What then are the major things we spend on, i.e. transportation, i.e. maybe electricity, water, and all the other amenities you can talk about. There have been an increase in all these, various components or commodities that we need, and the various things that we spend on, and so which is leading to a reduction in disposable income. And that is why a lot of people are saying that times are tough, which has also led to the reduction in purchasing power, because if they are not having the the money required, it means that their purchasing power will also reduce and will affect their living standards and their cost of living as well.
Is this a peculiar situation to Ghana or the world at large?
I'm not going to say it's only Ghana. It is global. We have seen, number one reason, as even people will say that it's no more a reason, is the Ukraine and Russia war. We have to, understand the impact of this very war on world economy. And so I must say that it's not peculiar to Ghana, but it's also happening in other countries. You talk about the US, you talk about UK, you go to Asia, all the other continents you can talk about, we have seen, a marginal increase in prices of goods and services. That is why banks all over the world are responding. I mean, central banks are responding with an increase in, their monetary policy rate. Fed, for instance, in the US has increased its rate by 0.5%. The Bank of England has done same by increasing its rate by 0.25%. This is a response to tackling the high inflation that is happening in all these countries. So I must say that it's not peculiar to Ghana. But when we get to the solution bit, what can we do domestically? There are external factors as I have mentioned. And also, the other external factor I even forgot to mention is that China is also facing some lockdowns, and they have what we call zero lockdown policy. And so China is also the global industry, and so we are seeing some shortfall in terms of the input that we demand, and then their production levels globally. And so there are external factors, there are domestic factors. When we get to the solutions, we look at what we can do internally, and then on the external side, what we can do to also reduce the external impact of all the factors that I have mentioned.
I know many economists hold the view that in such critical situations, in order to bolster growth within the economy, governments are expected to spend. In this respect, fiscal consolidation is the path government has chosen, considering that the space for it to even borrow is even limited.
Yeah.
So then, let me ask Julius, is this the time for government to give tax concessions or to tax more?
Good evening to our viewers, and then first of all, permit me to introduce our topic, which is the cost of living, which my brother has already emphasized on some of the key areas. But the general question is, what is cost of living? So cost of living simply would be the monetary amount that we pay for maybe goods and services over a particular geographical area. So as you rightly ask your questions, indeed, at times, hard for Ghanaians. When we look at the index, that is the cost of living index, that is trying to compare a particular cost of goods and services or price in a particular area or a city or a country or a town to another country or a city or a town. If we look at, the index, that is the cost of living in Accra against Kumasi, that is the index. So if you are looking at these parameters, then indeed, as we could all attest the fact that the price we pay for a particular goods and services maybe 2 or 3 years ago is not the same currently at the moment, then it means that yes, we are in a rising cost of, our cost of living is indeed going up. But as you rightly asked your questions, the timing at the moment is not right for government, because government finances is not really what government expect it to be. And then if we could take a little look at the recent economic outlook of Ghana as in our economy, the history from 2017, where Ghana was touted to be one of the growing economies in the world, averagely growing about 7% per annum, and then boom, in 2019 COVID struck and everything started declining. So we all saw the measures that government also put in place in the COVID period, where government tried to, brought in some form of interventions, paying electricity bills for Ghanaians, free water, feeding and the rest. So that require money, and government, had to just, all these monies and try to cater for Ghanaians, trying to, absorb some of the pressures that will come with COVID. So fast track to 2021, 2022, we are in. All the monies has been spent. I mean, if you look at our current budget, that is in 2022, government, revenue is projected to be around 100 billion, and then expenditure is at 137 billion. So right away, there's a budget deficit of 37 billion in the 22 budget. So the times that we are currently in is not a time that government should be looking at tax concessions, trying to give free things again to Ghanaians and maybe businesses and individuals. But the truth and the reality is that individuals and businesses are also suffering. So the way forward is at the moment, I believe, is what government is trying to, facing some challenges in some areas in trying to raise revenues to be able to cater for its expenditures.
In all this, what sometimes beats my mind has to do with the support we received from the world when we were fighting the COVID-19. Huge sums were brought into the country, the World Bank, the IMF, corporate organizations, countries supported us in our fight against COVID-19. Huge sums were brought into the country, and even around that time, let's say 2020, 2021, the Ghana Revenue Authority, for instance, had indicated that indeed they had met their budget projection and had actually exceeded. And so it beats my mind a little bit when we say that the government would have spent because the government did not have the money, especially when we had met our revenue targets and we had actually exceeded them.
Yes, like you rightly said, targets are just, a fixed amount of money given to anybody to achieve. So if the GRE came out that they have exceeded their revenue target, then indeed it presupposes that that fixed amount that they were given to collect by way of tax revenues was what they have actually achieved. But the question is, that money that they've been able to collect, is it enough to be able to cater for government expenditure? Like I introduced already, anytime we prepare our Ghana's budget, there's always a deficit. And our monies are spent.
But don't forget that government has actually reviewed its expenditure by some 20%.
Yes.
And so that budget debt to GDP ratio would obviously decrease.
Yes. Like you said, as at during the COVID era, there were some revenues that came from IMF, that came from the World Bank. And then the IMF in particular gave Ghana a special drawing right of about $2 billion. We had the World Bank also giving us about some $500 million in addition. But the question is, where has all these monies gone? And, the lack of accountability that has not been, brought forward for Ghanaians to see how much or how these monies have been used is what actually, driving Ghanaians to ask those questions. We heard that those accounts were presented to Parliament, and then the Speaker of Parliament didn't allow them to look at the account or interrogate it. So these are things that we are expecting government to be able to come out and, kind of like be accountable, transparent. When the monies are given, then we should be able to see how the monies have been used. Yes, in 2021 budget, government told us that they spent about 19 billion on COVID-related expenses. So definitely, it was captured in the budget. Now, the excess money that came in, where has the money gone to? And these are some tough questions that we try to put to government to be able to come out. Yes, the other infrastructures that government is also looking at, there's free SHS, that is hugely putting a strain on government finances, and then denying job creation for our youth. So the angles and the twist to the discussion is really, really enormous, and we expect that government this time around, the thrust that is not in the economy is hugely dependent on the fact that government has not been able to, come out well to be able to explain to Ghanaians that, these are where we are, and then this is the way forward. Obviously, we've seen some form of revenue measures with the e-levy that is already in implementation. But I believe that the harder question is, or the harder task for government is to be able to, now you are collecting money from Ghanaians. What Ghanaians want is, do the job for us, create the jobs, build our infrastructure, the roads. Yes, we have seen some improvement in our roads, but it looks as if the expenditure and then the revenues that are coming in, and the lack in accounting for those monies is what's usually not giving that trust for Ghanaians to be able to, contribute more to building our country. So we believe that as time goes on, government to be able to come out well for Ghanaians to be able to understand how our fiscals are going.
I remember, I think, yesterday there was a headline to the effect that government had saved some 9 billion Ghana cedis as a result of the reduction in the benchmark value recently, the reversal. And so I ask that, for instance, if you decide to remove the benchmark value by 30% across general goods and then for vehicles, does it not impact on the volume or the quantum of goods that would otherwise have come into the country as a result of that reversal which had been made, and thus that logic of some 9 billion being saved, does it really hold water?
Yeah, that's a good question. In any public policy decision, you have to look at the pros and the cons. Why will governments implement in the first place benchmark evaluation? Because we thought at the time that our ports were not competitive as compared to the various ports in the sub-region. Hence, let us reduce the discount. Let us implement a benchmark policy so that we will have a lot of traffic at our port. But at the same time, you also have some policies like one district, one factory, industrialization policies that is supposed to inure to import substitution industrialization. But at the same time, we have also opened the floodgates for a lot of goods to come in. And so you just have to look at the policy in terms of its impact on industrialization. That is why government had to come to the conclusion that let me reverse this policy. But the effect of the reversal will mean that the prices of the goods that we are importing will go up. And that is also one of the reasons why we are seeing the marginal increase in prices of goods and services, because the prices hitherto, the reversal, have gone up. Also, freight prices have also gone up. And if you talk to the Association of Ghana Exporters and Importers and also GUTA, they will tell you that freight costs has also gone up. So these are all cost components. But back again to the question of the nexus between reversal of the benchmark valuation and its impact on prices and goods, of goods and services, I would say that as a government in making a public policy, you'll have to look at the pros and cons. You are not going to get all right, but you have to look at what you get the maximum benefit. And government thinks that this is a time that we need revenue. As Julius alluded to, budget deficit for 2022 is 37 billion. Even one of our key revenue components, it was just made that we got the implementation, that is the e-levy, which is supposed to raise in excess of about 4 billion. And so in a time like this, government needs revenue, and hence the reversal of the benchmark valuation. But at the same time, its impact on prices on goods and services, because we are heavily import dependent economy, and which is going to lead to the marginal increase in prices of goods and services. So at one hand, government is raising revenue, but on the other hand, prices of goods and services are going up. That is why we have to look at the policy options we choose. What can we do in the near future? Produce a lot so that you wouldn't even think about having benchmark valuation, because the very essential things are being produced in your country. And so those are the policy options that government will have to go for.
Let me speak to Dr. Joseph Obeng and find out from him, since they are the ones who bring these goods into the country, they are the ones who bring in the vehicles for us to drive, how business is faring for them as businessmen. Good evening, sir, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, good evening.
Hello, Doc.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, by God's grace. I'm not well, but it's okay.
Doc, what's the state of affairs for you as traders and businessmen who bring in these general goods for us to utilize in the country?
Yeah, after those brilliant submissions, I didn't even have to say anything, because everything have been well spelled out from the earlier submissions. But I must say that we should not underestimate the impact of COVID, which occurred in year 2020 to date. the impact is still hanging over us, especially when it is affecting China the most, where commodity prices have gone up the roof, freight charges have gone up, and then even with the advent of the Ukraine-Russia war, it has also added up to these problems, the logistical problems of shipments of containers and all that. The prices of petroleum products having gone up to affect our exchange rate and all that. It is really having a toll on businesses, seriously. This is the impact globally. And then when you come home also, the reversal of the benchmark, as we said, have started having impact because it started somewhere in March and now it has started showing up in terms of high duty. The exchange rate, as we said, the depreciation rate was about 20%. Our goods were, our capital depleted about 20%, and it also affected pricing, it affected duty payment and all that. Interest rate has also gone up at the same time. And then because of doing business at the port itself, first, when we introduced the paperless system, the levies and taxes that we were paying were around 19 items. It was thrown down to 12, and now it has gone back to about 19. You know, the AE levy, the ECOWAS levy, the Shippers Authority, those items, about 19 of them, and all add up to the cost of doing business. And one person gave a brilliant submission. The purchasing power of the final consumer is also limited. So whilst even people will think that, oh, you are a trader, why don't you just pass on the cost to the final consumer? Here too, you are challenged because if you increase the price proportionally to the factors that is pushing the prices, it means that the final consumer can also not even buy. If he was going to buy 10 items, now he will only be able to buy maybe 5 items. Then it's reducing your turnover. When your turnover is reduced, what it means is that you are not able to service your debt at the bank if your capital is a borrowed one. If you source your things from, you get your suppliers credit from abroad also, how are you going to service this credit? So it's not a good time for doing business at all. So it's not even easy. People say that traders are even compounding the problem with high prices. It's not true. The competition out there is such that nobody can even outprice himself out of competition. It's never even possible. Whilst you look on and your capital is depleting by the day.
Well, the point that people make has to do with the fact that even at the time when the benchmark value was in place, the expectation of government was that this would have forced your businessmen to have also given us prices that were moderate for people to purchase so as not to drive inflation in the country. But really, it didn't actually reflect for those who went to the market to purchase things. And so the reversal for many makes sense. And if you look at AGI, they say it's important now we build our local capacity than always rely on imports.
So that's where the confusion is. You see, when your panelists were making those brilliant submissions, they were saying that when the benchmark have made goods and services cheaper and then abundant in this country and then affecting. AGI, where it suits them, if they go to government and then tell government that, you know, the benchmark reversal policy is affecting them because it has made imports cheaper. So they cannot compete. So what an irony, what a contradiction. What are we talking about? That it did not have impact positively on the people. Otherwise, why would they even complain in the first place? That because of the benchmark reduction, they are not able to compete. Then you see the irony. And then when they want to convince government on the other side also, they say that, you see, they did not even reduce their prices. I mean, this thing is very confusing. Actually, we are able to give up our part of our profit to the consuming public because of the benchmark reduction policy, and it made goods and services very cheap in the market. Had it not been the benchmark policy, at 2020, where the impact of the COVID was so high, what would we have done if the duty prices were also high? We were able to contain the prices. The prices did not go much as it could have gone, proportionally with how the world commodity prices were going up. So there's no truism in what that assumption that we did not transfer the benefit to the consumer. We did transfer to them, and it is manifest even now that it has been reversed.
Has the magnitude of the business you used to do in the past been affected as a result of the reversal of the benchmark values?
You said?
I'm saying, has the scale of business you used to do in the past before the reversal of the benchmark value, has it been affected?
Yeah, you see, like the argument that I was doing before the introduction of the benchmark value policy, if I will give you a clear example, you see the cars that were coming into the country, we will count every car, any brand new car that have come with a registration number of Togolese number or Nigerian number. Are you aware of that? Recently, do you see those cars? You don't see them because they were being smuggled at that time because they could not pay the duties here. And so, and I've also told you that rice were being smuggled through the Western Corridor, and it was about 500 million metric tons that was being smuggled. Just after the introduction of the benchmark, this thing stopped to the barest minimum. It means that those 500,000 have been translated into the revenue that they got to increase their target, to exceed their target. This is the principle. When taxes are affordable, people tend to comply. People are able to do their business, legitimate business, and bring more. And then when the reverse take place, you also see the reverse happening. So it's a principle. When you make taxes affordable, compliance level gets so high, and people can do, and government can do a lot more. All that we have been saying is that we should spread the tax net wider than expected. The electricians, the artisans, and all that, they are all capable of paying taxes. We have to fund them into the net. The road toll that have been stopped, we have to find an innovative way to make it work efficiently and bring them. And then what we are doing, that we make sure that the rate of the taxes is minimal, so that the payment itself shouldn't be a problem to anybody, and the government will have a huge sense of revenue to develop this country. But then if you lump taxes on just one sector of the economy, and then you punish them, then they become victims, and then they cannot even grow, and then the entirety of the economy also suffers, and that's what we are talking about.
It's interesting you brought in the issue about taxes, and that brings in the e-levy. Since its introduction, and government has explained that the e-levy is one of the platforms that it can use to rope in the informal sector. In that regard, I want to find out, has its implementation affected your businesses as Guta?
The e-levy, the impact of e-levy will be quite negligible, I must tell you, because we have our traditional ways of doing business. The e-levy, the Momo, and all that, the e-transaction came to enhance on our transactional way of doing business. As to whether the rate of the tax is affordable, that can be discussed. But if we say that it will have an impact on trading, now I'm talking from the perspective of trading, then I would say no, it's not going to have a maximum impact. All that we seek is that taxes are spread and spread wider to capture a lot more people. So in that regard, we support the introduction of the e-levy, which seeks to do that. You know, you recognize that we even push for the payment of taxes by those people who are doing online businesses. And that's the tax that they brought called the e-commerce. This one was pushed by Guta because the traditional businesses, while they are paying taxes, those who are doing business on online and all that were not captured into the tax net. And then when government need money, you come to this same group of people, this small group of people, and then it strangulates them into doing business. And so anything that seeks to expand the tax net, we are for it. And that's why we are also calling that the tax exemption policy should be scrapped. It's not helping anybody. People are just taking advantage of it. And we find it difficult to understand why it hasn't been revised up to date. So we have to do all these things, and I think everybody can pay its bit, and then it will develop the country as we are all seeing. And then also prudence in management of the expenditure, because if you have value for money, and then we are able to streamline expenditure to also make sure that we are having savings from expenditure itself. You know that when we are able to do value for money check-ins on the way we spend money and all that, we can also have savings from expenditure itself. Then it also becomes a form of a tax. So we have to also look at the way we manage our expenditure so that whatever suffering that we are having will be beneficial for all of us.
Dr. Abenwu, thank you for making time to join us tonight on Fact Sheet.
Thank you so much.
We'll take a short breather. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation live on ETV Ghana. And the question that will be on our minds would be whether these taxes which have been introduced, are they a recipe for smuggling? Saying that, for instance, if goods are coming in from Togo and they are cheaper, would people be smuggling them from our neighboring countries into the country? We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Fact Sheets live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1 live on Facebook and Twitter as well. Our handle is ETV Ghana. You can follow the conversation and share your thoughts with us tonight. So I come back to the studio and we revert to the earlier point I was making about whether all these measures government is putting in place to ensure it rakes in revenue, rather is not disadvantaging us in terms of the possibility of people bringing in cheaper goods from unapproved routes into the country in order to make their money.
Well, it depends on the data available. I will not be able to sit here to tell you that once there is a reversal in benchmark valuation, it is going to lead to an influx of smuggling. But of course, we can understand that when prices of, the cost of bringing goods into the country is so high, people might try to smuggle. No two ways about that. But as a country, we should look at where we are. Vis-a-vis revenue mobilization and industrialization. It is not pick and drop, but it's about amalgamation of both policies. And so government wants to raise revenue. Benchmark valuation is not the only source of revenue. We have made the point about widening the tax net and raking in a lot of revenue. Doc's comment about passing the tax exemption bill. It has been in Parliament for a while now. The minister promised that by now it should have been passed, but it has not been passed. What is preventing us from passing such an important, tax element? Because we are giving a lot in tax exemptions. Why did we even implement tax exemptions at the time? Are those conditions still available? I think as a country, we don't need those, huge tax exemptions. We have to scrap or be able to manage it very well. And also, it has to be targeted. I give tax exemptions because maybe this sector, there's not much investment. And so for me to attract that investment, I'm giving you a tax exemption on that sector. But as a country, we have a lot of, potentials and a lot of things that will attract, investment into our country, i.e., some level of fairly macroeconomic economic stability, again, political stability. These are things that should be able to attract a lot of investment into our country, either than giving a lot of these tax exemptions. Now, back to the point again, whether the policies implemented now is going to help in revenue mobilization, but at the same time affect industrialization or import volumes. I believe it's not a, one-sided argument. We have to look at the analysis and see the best policy option. Because as I have said, in making public policy, you have pros and cons. Every public policy will have advantages and disadvantages. But at the same time, a government should be able to choose the option that you'll be able to, get the maximum benefit. And so you are scrapping benchmark. You have said that you have raised about 9 billion. At the same time, what is benchmark reversal impact on the prices of goods and services? Then you have to look at the numbers and choose the option, that is most appropriate. But I believe that as a country, as it stands now, we need to maybe look at benchmark, but again, look at revenue mobilization, because it cannot be a choose, and drop, approach, but an amalgamation of these policies to get to wherever I want to get.
In my mind tonight, we're not going to have a very technical conversation.
Yeah.
In my mind tonight, we're going to have a bread, kinky, yam, plantain conversation.
Yeah.
So why is the price of plantain high? Why is the crab expensive?
Yeah.
Why is the rice expensive? Okay,
Yeah.
rice is imported, so why is it expensive?
Yeah.
Why is my tomatoes expensive?
Yeah.
Why is my red oil expensive?
Yeah, fair,
why are they
fair.
expensive?
Yeah, you have a very legit point to raise. Why are these
No,
things
I want
number one
a
reason
layman's
would be
explanation, not your technical.
No, it's not. I'm not going to
Yes.
be technical, but very, because I bought even coffee brookman yesterday, just three tiny ones for 5 cedis, and so it's not like I'm an armchair, economist, but I'm looking at the realities on the ground. The first reason will be the prices of petroleum prices, especially diesel. If you look at diesel, I was checking the board before coming, 11.3 pesos per liter. And it is going up. And look at what the transporters have done. They've increased, transport fares by 20%. What it means is that if I'm transporting plantain from my hometown to Accra or Kumasi, the price is going to go up. And also, as a seller, I will input that price on the final commodity. And so that is number one. And of course, we are having, production challenges because of, the input we are not getting in terms of what we need to produce fertilizer. And so for this year, for instance, I can predict that maybe the output and yield we expect from certain food crops, we might not be able to achieve it because the input thereof, we are not getting it as a result of supply chain disruption, which is caused by the Russia-Ukraine war. So these are just basic, explanations to why all these things are important. Again, you mentioned about palm oil. Indonesia and India are planning to put a ban on exportation of palm oil. If what we are producing domestically is not enough to feed the market, basic principle of demand and supply means that demand will outstrip supply, which will lead to a hike in the prices of palm oil. So these are just basic, explanations to why we are having food prices going up. And if you look at the inflation index by the Ghana Statistical Service, the key component of why inflation has hit 19.4% as of the last month is food inflation, which I have mentioned the reasons causing them.
But Julius, I'll ask this one to simplify for me. So my salary has not gone up. My salary stays the same. Price of fuel products is gone up. Price of food has gone up. Transport fares have gone up. Utilities, we are being told, are going to go up. The call charges have gone up as well. And so why should I be taxed more, seeing that my revenue cannot even buy me the things I used to buy just yesterday? Why should I be taxed more? I want us to have a very simplistic conversation.
I think, the simple question, answer to the question is that government is also handicapped in the sense that government is not having the needed revenue to carry its activities. provide roads, hospitals, education, free SHS, a big factor. Also, you know, when we look at the budget, there are 3 budget items that takes care of government money: compensation emolument, that is payment of wages and salaries to public sector workers, interest payment on loans that the government have borrowed over the years. As we stand here, Ghana, our GDP is around $64 billion, which is around the equivalent of 480 billion Ghana cedis. Out of this, our debt to GDP ratio is around 81.6%. So like you are saying, all the indicators are not favoring the ordinary Ghanaian, yet there is an imposition of taxes.
So what happened to cutting your coat according to your size? It's not compulsory that you build 100 agenda 101. All of it must happen this year. It's not compulsory. It is not also compulsory for government in terms of its obligations to its foreign business partners in terms of government's indebtedness. You are an economist, you are a financial person, you know that there's a possibility, seeing that this is a world situation we are talking about, for a renegotiation of your repayment plan.
It is very difficult.
No, it's not.
No, the last point you make,
the
last point you make about repayment, Ghana's, if you look at the portfolio of our debt, it is not bilateral, but it's more of a lot of people, private investors, who have given your money to you. And you cannot go to them and say that let's renegotiate. Those days are long gone. In the past 10 years, Ghana has done a lot of commercial loans, very expensive ones, of course. That is why we have seen the trajectory of growth in terms of the volume of our debt and also interest payment. Now, back to government financing. 3 budget items, as Julius mentioned. Number 1, cost of the interest payment. This year, you've earmarked about 37 billion for interest payment, 35 billion for compensation to government employees, about 26 or 27 billion for capital expenditure. You know, a statutory payment, yes. And then about 16 to capital expenditure. So it means that even the top 3 is consuming your projected 100 billion revenue that you envisage. So the fiscal space is tight already. Government has no breathing space in terms of public financing. That is why in 2017 government had to enact a law we call the rigidity law to give government a free hand to spend and to because the budget is very rigid as it stands now. That is why we have to look at innovative ways of raising revenue. But I must also say that in as much as we raise revenue, we should be prudent on the expenditure side. What are the very expenditure items we are spending on? How can we cut down on some of these recurrent expenditure? Because let me give an example to a household. I'm a father in the house, there's no money in the house. Then I eat in Kempinski restaurant. At the same time, my children are in the house, they can't even get, plantain to even eat. We don't do that. That is why in as much as we talk about revenue mobilization.
Is the government eating at Kempinski restaurant?
No, it's an example to say that there are some expenditure items that we have to look at how we can cut so that we'll be able to free up this fiscal space because it's already tight. 3 items. You cannot default on interest. You cannot default on compensation to government employees. Just last 2 months, at the end of the month, people's salaries had not hit. And look at the commotion in the system. This is one thing that government will not want to, get itself into. Labor is now asking for increment of about 19.4%, commensurate to inflation rate. But government budget cannot support that. Government cannot even say they are going to increase wages about 10% in the next year because the fiscal space is very tight. So how do you get out of it? You raise revenue, but more importantly, look at the expenditure items. If you have to review some of the flagship policies, review it so that you don't create a lot of burden on the ordinary Ghanaian.
You see, to add to what he's saying, usually we've been advising that, look, you see, when you are in opposition, the thoughts and then your ideas are fantastic and they are brilliant, but you are not in government, so you don't even know government coffers. As to whether you are given the opportunity to come and rule the country, depending on the availability of the resources there, is another thing. So if you're in opposition and then yes, we need the ideas to be able to move the country forward. But like he said, it should be commensurate with the level of money that you have to, and then the opportunity for you to even spend. If you continue to plan programs in our manifestos that will not have the money to execute them, it is going to increase government borrowing, or government is also going to look at homegrowns. And the homegrown solutions that government will do is to impose taxes on Ghanaians. The reason why Ghanaians are reluctant on the payment of taxes, one of the reasons, I mean, if you have followed the current government, and the way they have handled our tax, infrastructure, I mean, you came in with a fantastic idea that you are going to move from taxation to production.
Yeah.
So Ghanaians were happy. A lot of taxes were abolished in the system. Ghanaians were happy. Businesses were happy. And, all of a sudden, we are trying to go back to the same taxing mechanism. I wouldn't sit here and say that tax is not good, because, yes, government don't do business. Government can only raise finance through taxation. So taxation is the bloodline of government. But the issue here is that once today we are here, tomorrow we are here, it does not even give our tax policy, our tax environment that stability. You can't even predict. Tomorrow there is this tax abolishment, the next day we are imposing new taxes. And even the taxes that are already in the system, there is VAT. VAT, for instance, which is value added tax, has been tampered from 2017 to today. They change the rate, the next day they add new levies, they introduce COVID-19 levy, or is having an impact on VAT. VAT is the last tax for all indirect taxes. So whatever taxes that is being imposed on the indirect way, VAT will apply. So when you go to the port, you are paying VAT on import duties. When you are buying goods from your normal restaurant, you are paying VAT. And there are existing levies on all these. So one thing is that government also introduced a VAT withholding mechanism that, yes, in Ghana, VAT is supposed to be borne by the final consumer, but it is being charged by the person making the supply. In 2017, the government brought a withholding VAT concept because they realized that most companies or most individuals that do charge the VATs, they don't account to government. So government brought in a law, which is the VAT amendment law, trying to withhold a portion of the VAT, so that the withholding agent, that is the credible institutions, companies and individuals, that will be able to account the money to government, and then the final consumer or the person who is supposed to account for the VAT, you go and take the remaining portion of the VAT. But as it stands now, there is the data, for government or for the authorities to be able to go and locate the other half of the VAT is not there. And then government has brought in the concept of national ID cards, trying to bring people into identification so that we can even identify them by the Ghana card or the TIN numbers. So the issue here is e-levy going to solve government revenue problems? That is the discussion that we will still continue to engage.
Well, we certainly will continue to engage on this path, we have chosen tonight as to the burden on Ghanaians in terms of hardships that they are going through. Same salaries, same wages, and yet the prices of goods and services are going up every day astronomically, and we have to deal with it. My guests tonight have been Julius Chima and Emmanuel Amwadakwa, who have joined me tonight to try to understand the burden on Ghanaians, where it's coming from, and whether indeed it is a reality. Tonight, maybe we gave you a hint as to whether this is real or is not real. My name is Samuel Ishen. On behalf of my producer and my director, I'd like to thank you for being a part of the conversation tonight. I'm hoping that we'll meet again, God willing, next week, Tuesday, for another conversation. I wish you a good night.